Jake Miller's stomach growled loud enough to echo off the rocks. He chuckled to himself as he finally settled down on a flat boulder overlooking the violet valleys of Threshold 7. The view was incredible from up here. The twin suns were starting their afternoon descent, painting the crystalline forest below in shades of amber and purple. Those strange tree-like structures that the science team kept arguing about caught the light and threw it back like a million tiny mirrors. His legs ached from the morning's work. 4 hours of cataloging plant samples, taking soil readings, and documenting the local ecosystem had left him exhausted and starving. The sandwich he pulled from his pack looked like heaven right now, real turkey from the colony's hydroponics bay, not the synthetic stuff they usually got stuck with. He unwrapped it slowly, savoring the smell. The bread was still warm. Perfect. Jake took his first bite and closed his eyes, letting the taste fill his senses. For just a moment he could pretend he wasn't on an alien world millions of miles from Earth. He could pretend he was back home, sitting in his backyard, watching normal birds instead of the weird floating gas bag creatures that passed for wildlife here. Then he heard it. A voice. Small. Uncertain. Coming from the cave entrance about 20 feet behind him. "We eat, you're not need food?" The sandwich fell from Jake's hand. He spun around so fast he nearly fell off the rock. His heart hammered against his ribs as his eyes locked onto 3 small creatures emerging from the shadows of the cave. They were reptilian, about the size of house cats, but that's where any comparison to Earth animals ended. Their scales shimmered with an internal light, soft blues and purples that rippled across their bodies like waves. Small wings, barely developed, pressed tight against their sides. But it was their eyes that caught him. Luminescent, intelligent, and filled with desperate hope. "Did you just talk?" Jake's voice came out as barely a whisper. His hand instinctively moved toward the emergency beacon on his belt. Every xenobiologist in the colony had heard the stories about Dracovians. Most people thought they were myths, scary tales told by drunken spacers. But Jake had seen the classified reports. The old ship logs. The warnings. These were Dracovian hatchlings. Baby dragons if the legends were true. The smallest one crept forward on unsteady legs. Its belly was sunken, ribs visible beneath those glowing scales. The sight of it hit Jake like a punch to the gut. "Mother. No, come back," it said, the words broken and difficult like a child learning to speak. "We very hungry. Please?" Jake's training screamed at him. Protocol was clear. Unknown alien species, especially predators, were to be observed from a distance and reported immediately. No contact. No interaction. Especially not feeding them. His supervisor's voice echoed in his head. Dr. Brooks would kill him for this. But those eyes. Those scared, hungry eyes looking up at him. His training didn't stand a chance. Jake picked up his fallen sandwich, brushed off the dust, and tore it into 3 equal pieces. The hatchlings watched his every movement, their small bodies trembling with hunger and fear. He held out the pieces in his palm. What happened next would be burned into his memory forever. The 3 little creatures rushed forward, not with the savage hunger of predators, but with the desperate gratitude of starving children. They made small chirping sounds as they ate, musical and strange. The largest one paused between bites, looked up at him with those glowing eyes and managed to say, "Thank, kind stranger." Something in Jake's chest tightened. He dug into his pack, pulling out everything edible he had. Protein bars. Dried fruit. A pack of crackers. The hatchlings needed it more than he did. "Where's your mother?" he asked gently, kneeling down to their level. The middle one swallowed its food and looked at him. Its voice trembled when it spoke. "Hunt. Long time. Not come back. We scared." "How long has she been gone?" Jake handed out another protein bar. "Many sunrises," the smallest one said. "Food all gone. Water almost gone. We wait so long." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. What kind of world was this where baby anythings had to starve alone? He made a mental note to check the ecosystem reports again. Something was wrong here. Predators didn't abandon their young unless something had gone terribly wrong. He was reaching for the last protein bar when the world changed. The temperature dropped. The light dimmed. A shadow fell across the valley, vast and dark. Jake looked up and his blood turned to ice. A roar split the air like thunder, primal, furious, and so loud it shook dust from the cave ceiling. Small rocks tumbled down the cliff face. The hatchlings scattered behind Jake, their chirps turning to panicked shrieks. The Dracovian mother landed 20 feet away, and she was everything the nightmares had promised and worse. She was massive, 30 feet of pure armored muscle and rage. Her scales were deep crimson, scarred and battle-worn. Horns like twisted black obsidian crowned her head. But it was her eyes that froze Jake in place. They glowed like molten gold, ancient and intelligent and absolutely furious. Plasma flickered in her throat, casting her scarred face in hellish orange light. The heat of it washed over Jake even from this distance. One blast and he'd be ash. One swipe of those claws and he'd be torn apart. The hatchlings were crying out in their language, rapid clicks and chirps, but their mother's eyes never left Jake. Her massive head swung toward him, nostrils flaring. A translator device embedded in her chest crackled with static, then a voice emerged, deep, grinding like mountains collapsing. "You touched my children." Jake couldn't breathe. His legs wouldn't work. Every survival instinct screamed at him to run, but his body was locked in place by pure terror. He could only stare into those ancient, furious eyes as the plasma in her throat began to glow brighter and brighter. This was how he died. Not in a lab accident. Not peacefully in his sleep. But vaporized by an angry mother dragon on an alien world, all because he couldn't walk past hungry kids without helping. The plasma grew brighter. The heat intensified. Jake closed his eyes and waited for the end. The Dracovian mother's wings spread wide, and suddenly the twin suns disappeared behind a wall of crimson scales. Jake's world went dark except for that terrible glow in her throat. The wind from her wings knocked him back a step and he tasted dust and something else, something ancient and dangerous. That's when he saw the wound. A massive gash ran across her left side, deep enough that he could see the muscle beneath the scales. Silver blood, actual silver, dripped steadily onto the rocks below. The edges of the wound were dark, infected. She'd been in a serious fight, and from the way she held herself, exhausted and swaying slightly, she hadn't won. She was dying. Slowly but dying. The hatchlings suddenly rushed past Jake's legs, nearly knocking him over. They placed themselves between him and their mother, their small bodies trembling but determined. They chirped frantically in their language, clicks and whistles and sounds Jake's throat could never make. The smallest one pressed against his leg as if trying to shield him. The mother's massive head tilted, those golden eyes focusing on her children. She listened to their desperate explanation, and Jake watched something shift in her expression. The raw fury dimmed slightly, replaced by confusion. Jake's survival instinct finally broke through the fear. Run. His brain screamed it. Dive into the cave. Hide behind the rocks. Call for emergency extraction. Do literally anything except stand here like an idiot waiting to become dragon food. Instead he stepped forward. His legs moved before his brain caught up. One step. Then another. Toward the 30-foot killing machine that could end him without trying. "Wait," Jake heard himself say. His voice was steady, which was weird because his hands were shaking. "Just wait a second." The plasma in her throat flared brighter. A warning. The heat washed over him like standing too close to a furnace. Sweat broke out across his forehead. Jake slowly reached for his field pack. Every movement was deliberate, careful. The mother's eyes tracked his hand like a laser sight. He could see the intelligence there, the calculation. She was deciding whether to kill him now or in 30 seconds. "Your kids were starving," Jake said, keeping his voice calm and even. He pulled the pack around to his front, unzipping it with fingers that barely cooperated. "And you're hurt. That wound is infected. You know it is." Her growl deepened and Jake felt it in his bones. The ground vibrated with it. Small pebbles danced at his feet. He pulled out his medical kit, the good one with the universal coagulants they'd developed for cross-species treatment. Then he grabbed the emergency rations, the ones he'd been saving for situations way less terrifying than this. "I'm not a threat," Jake continued, taking another step. His heart hammered so hard he could hear it in his ears. "Look at me. Really look. I'm 5'10" and 170 pounds soaking wet. You could literally sneeze and kill me. But your children needed help. And now you do too." The mother's translator crackled with static. When her voice came through, it was deep and grinding like continents shifting. "You approach a wounded Dracovian? You are either brave or stupid." "Probably both," Jake admitted. He managed a weak smile, though his face felt frozen. "Maybe more stupid than brave, honestly. But I'm also a xenobiologist with medical training. I've got universal coagulants, broad-spectrum antibiotics, and wound sealant. That gash on your side? It's infected. Badly. If you don't get treatment, you've got maybe 3 days before sepsis kills you." He took another step. The hatchlings chirped encouragingly, still pressed between them. "And then what happens to them?" Jake gestured to the babies. "They're what, 4 months old? They can't hunt. They can barely fly. Without you they die too. The mother's eyes narrowed, but she didn't blast him. That felt like progress. The largest hatchling tugged at her foreleg with its tiny claws. It looked up at her with those luminous eyes and said in clear words, "He fed us, Mama. He kind like the stories say. Like the humans in the teaching songs." Jake blinked. Teaching songs? Stories? What stories? The mother's eyes widened, just a fraction, but Jake saw it. Her aggressive stance wavered. The wings lowered slightly. She stared at Jake for a long moment, and he could practically see her mind working behind those ancient eyes. You would. Her translator struggled with the concept. You would treat a predator? While she displays threat. While she could kill you. The disbelief in her voice was so human it startled him. You're not a predator right now, Jake said softly. He knelt down and opened his medical kit, laying out supplies on the rock. Coagulant spray. Antibiotic patches. Sterile wraps. You're a mom who went hunting to feed her kids. You got hurt trying to provide for them. And you came back bleeding and exhausted to find a stranger with your children. He looked up at her, meeting those golden eyes directly. You're not a monster. You're a parent. And yeah, I'm going to help. Because that's what we do. The silence stretched out. Jake could hear his own breathing, fast and shallow. The hatchlings made small hopeful sounds. Then, slowly, so slowly Jake almost didn't believe it, the mother lowered herself to the ground. Her massive body settled onto the rocks with a sound like distant thunder. The plasma in her throat dimmed to a faint glow. But her eyes never left Jake. Not for a second. Humans, she rumbled, the word coming out like gravel grinding together. The pack-bonding species. The story said you were unusual. Jake approached with his medical supplies. His hands were steadier now, focus pushing away fear. This was familiar territory, helping someone hurt. It didn't matter that the patient was a dragon. The basics were the same. We prefer the term aggressively compassionate, he said, examining the wound up close. It was worse than he thought. The infection had spread deep. This is going to sting. Probably a lot. The coagulant spray burns like crazy on open wounds. The mother's chest rumbled. Was that a laugh? Pain is acceptable. Death is not. My children need me. Then let's make sure they keep you, Jake said and pressed the spray trigger. The mother's entire body tensed, her claws digging furrows in the rock. But she didn't move. Didn't blast him. Just endured as Jake worked to save her life. The hatchlings pressed close, chirping soft encouragement to their mother. And Jake realized something incredible. He wasn't afraid anymore. He was exactly where he needed to be. 2 hours had passed since Jake finished treating Vera's wound. The twin suns had set, and the crystalline forest glowed with its own soft bioluminescence. Inside the cave it was peaceful, almost surreal considering what had happened earlier. Jake sat with his back against the cool cave wall, his legs stretched out in front of him. The 3 hatchlings were piled against him like oversized puppies, their small bodies warm and their breathing steady. The smallest one, Pip as he'd started calling her in his head, had her head resting on his knee. The other 2 were curled up against his other leg, occasionally twitching in their sleep. The mother lay at the cave entrance, her massive form silhouetted against the glowing forest outside. She'd introduced herself as Vera, though the translator struggled with the actual sounds of her name. Her wound was properly dressed now, wrapped in sterile bandages that glowed faintly with healing nanites. Already she looked better, stronger, more alert. Jake broke the comfortable silence with the question that had been gnawing at him since he'd seen those starving hatchlings. Why hasn't there been food? He asked quietly, keeping his voice low so he wouldn't wake the little ones. This planet's ecosystem reports showed healthy predator-prey balance. There should be plenty of game. Vera's eyes glowed in the darkness like twin embers. She was quiet for a moment, and Jake could almost feel her deciding whether to trust him with the truth. A corporation, she finally said, her voice low and bitter. Galactic Mining Consolidated. They arrived 6 months ago with official paperwork, permits, all the proper documentation. They claimed they had authorization to extract crystal deposits from the deep caves. Jake felt his stomach tighten. He knew that company. Every colonist knew them. They had a reputation for pushing boundaries and finding legal loopholes. But they lied, Vera continued. Her tail coiled tighter around the cave entrance, a protective gesture. The permits were forged or bought. I don't know which. What I do know is that within 2 months, the prey started dying. Dying how? Jake leaned forward slightly, careful not to disturb the sleeping hatchlings. Poison? Vera's voice was hard as stone. They dumped their mining waste into the underground rivers. The water system here is all connected. What they poisoned in the deep caves spread everywhere. The grass-eaters drank the water and died. Or they got sick and fled to other territories. Within 3 months, my hunting grounds were empty. Jake's hands clenched into fists. He'd reviewed the environmental impact statements before coming to Threshold 7. They'd all been approved. All supposedly safe. My mate, Stormbringer, he was smarter than me about these things, Vera said, and Jake heard the pain in her voice even through the mechanical translation. He said something was wrong. Said the company was hiding something. 3 moon cycles ago, about 90 of your days, he went to investigate their main facility. She paused and the silence stretched heavy. He never came back, Vera said quietly. I waited 5 days. Then I went looking. I found his scales scattered near their security perimeter. Beautiful crimson scales that I'd groomed 1,000 times. Just scattered on the ground like trash. Jake felt his jaw tighten, anger building in his chest. They killed him. They kill anything that comes near their secrets, Vera confirmed. I saw the defensive systems. Automated plasma cannons. Electric barriers. Things designed specifically to kill large organic targets. They knew we were here. They knew and they prepared to eliminate us. She shifted her weight and Jake heard the pain in the movement. I've been hunting farther and farther from my territory ever since. 40, 50 miles away, trying to find prey that hasn't been poisoned. But I'm one mother with 3 young to protect. I can't leave them for long. I can't carry back enough food. Jake was starting to understand. Today I tracked a large predator into its own territory. Desperate. I fought it for its kill. Not for glory, not for territory, but for scraps to feed my children. I barely won. Then I flew back here, bleeding, exhausted, and found you with my babies. She made a sound that might have been a laugh if it wasn't so bitter. I expected a corpse robber. Someone picking through my cave while I was gone. Or maybe a poacher come to steal hatchlings for the black market. Instead, I found a human giving them food. Jake pulled out his datapad, his mind already racing through possibilities. These permits they claim to have. Did anyone from the Galactic Council actually verify them? Vera's laugh was harsh. Who would listen to a Dracovian? Who would believe us? The galaxy has feared us for so long they forgot we can think. Feel. Love our children. They look at us and see teeth and claws and scales. They assume monster. They don't see mother. The smallest hatchling, Pip, stirred against Jake's leg, making a small contented sound in her sleep. Without thinking, Jake reached down and gently stroked her scales. They were warm under his touch, smooth and surprisingly soft. I'm listening, Jake said firmly, looking up at Vera. And I'm going to make sure others listen too. Vera's ancient eyes studied him for a long moment. Why? She asked, and there was genuine confusion in her voice. Why would you risk yourself for creatures you just met? We are predators. Apex killers. We could turn on you tomorrow. Your people should fear us. Your survival instinct should tell you to run. Jake looked down at the 3 sleeping hatchlings pressed against him, then back up at Vera. He thought about how to explain something so fundamental to human nature that he'd never really put it into words before. You know what we have on Earth? He said slowly. We have this thing where if we see a baby anything, and I mean literally anything, we just lose our minds trying to protect it. Doesn't matter if it's a baby bear that could grow up to weigh 800 pounds and eat us. Doesn't matter if it's a baby alligator with teeth designed to kill. We've bottle-fed baby lions. We've rescued baby spiders. Something in our brains just sees something small and helpless and goes, must protect, and we can't stop ourselves even if we wanted to. He gestured to her children sleeping peacefully against him. Your kids were hungry. You were hurt. The math was simple for me. Help. That's it. That's the whole equation. Vera tilted her head, processing this. And now that I know there's a corporation out here murdering sapient beings and destroying entire ecosystems? Jake's voice went hard, his eyes cold. Well, we humans have another thing we're known for throughout the galaxy. We really hate bullies. Vera was silent for a long moment. Then her translator crackled to life with words that would change everything. Help me, Jake Miller. Help me save my children. Help me save my people. And I will show the galaxy what happens when humans and Dracovians stand together. Jake pulled out his communicator, his thumb hovering over the emergency broadcast button. He smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. Then let's introduce that corporation to humanity's worst habit. Which is making friends with things that can kill us, Jake said, starting to record. And then going absolutely feral when someone threatens our friends. The broadcast went live at 0600 station time. Jake had spent 3 hours editing the footage, his hands shaking as he pieced together the story. He'd filmed everything on his standard issue colony datapad, the starving hatchlings with their ribs showing through glowing scales, Vera's infected wound seeping silver blood, the water samples that lit up his toxicity scanner like a Christmas tree. He'd even gone back to the Galactic Mining Consolidated Security Perimeter and filmed the scattered crimson scales, each one a piece of evidence in what was clearly a murder. But the image that would change everything was simpler than all of that. It was just Jake sitting cross-legged in the cave at sunset, 3 baby Dracovians curled trustingly in his lap like oversized cats, while their massive mother watched from the entrance with eyes that held something fragile and precious, hope. He'd titled it simply, "They were hungry. Their mother was dying. What would you do?" Then he'd uploaded it to every human channel he could access and collapsed into an exhausted sleep. 12 hours later, Jake was jolted awake by his door slamming open. Dr. Emily Brooks, his supervisor at the colony, stormed into his quarters. She was a tall woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair usually pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. Right now, that bun was half undone and she looked like she'd been up all night. Jake sat up fast, his heart racing. This was it. He was getting fired. Possibly arrested. Maybe both. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Emily demanded. Jake ran a hand through his hair. "Probably ended my career? Violated about 15 protocols? Made first contact without authorization?" He winced. "I know I messed up. Emily grabbed him by both shoulders and Jake braced for the worst. Instead, she shook him once and said, "You've started a movement." "What?" She shoved her datapad at his chest. "Look." Jake fumbled with the device, pulling up the screen. His eyes went wide. The broadcast had over 50 million views. 50 million. In 12 hours. But that wasn't the crazy part. The crazy part was the response. His message inbox was completely flooded, thousands of messages still loading. The tracking map showed dozens of ships changing course toward Threshold 7. Not just any ships. Jake recognized the signatures. Environmental Corps vessels. Wildlife Protection Agency cruisers. Legal advocacy groups. Independent aid organizations. "Keep scrolling," Emily said, and there was something fierce in her voice. Jake scrolled down and stopped breathing. 3 human military frigates had broken formation from their patrol routes and were burning hard toward their location. Their official statement read, "En route to ensure the safety of allied sapient species and investigate potential war crimes." Allied? Jake looked up at Emily, confused. "But the Dracovians aren't part of any alliance. They're not even officially recognized as." "They are now," Emily interrupted, grinning like a wolf. "The human ambassador to the Galactic Council filed formal recognition papers an hour after your broadcast went viral. Full statement said that humanity officially recognizes the Dracovian species as sapient equals and any further aggression against them will be considered an act of war against human interests." Jake felt dizzy. An act of war? "Emily, I just fed some hungry kids and patched up their mom. I didn't mean to start an international incident." "Galactic incident," Emily corrected. "And the Council is absolutely losing their minds. Half the delegates didn't even know Dracovians were real. They thought they were myths. Now they've got the human delegation formally recognizing them and 3 warships heading to protect them." She laughed, the sound sharp and satisfied. "The Galactic Mining Consolidated representative tried to file a complaint. Got shouted down by 6 other species who apparently also have permit irregularities to discuss with that company." Jake's communicator started buzzing insistently. He looked down at it and watched as message after message flooded in, the notification count climbing so fast it was just a blur. He opened a few at random. "Family of 4 here, we're sending supplies. What do the babies eat? Xenobiologist specializing in ecosystem restoration. I'm volunteering. When can I arrive? Teacher from New Boston Colony. Can we set up cultural exchange? My students want to learn about Dracovian culture. Environmental lawyer. Pro bono. Let's bury these corporate criminals." On and on it went. Human families offering to send food and supplies. Scientists volunteering their expertise. Teachers wanting to start programs. Doctors asking about Dracovian physiology so they could help. Engineers proposing water purification systems. Even kids writing messages in crayon that their parents had scanned and sent. One message from a 10-year-old girl just said, "Tell the baby dragons we love them and they're safe now." Jake felt his throat tighten. This was humanity in its purest form. Someone showed them something small and hurt and scared, and the entire species collectively said, "Not on our watch." "There's more," Emily said. She pulled up another screen. The Threshold 7 Council just voted to establish a protected zone around Vera's territory. No mining. No development. Full conservation status. And get this, they're asking Vera to be part of the council. Want Dracovian representation in colonial government. "She'll never agree to that," Jake said. "She doesn't trust." His communicator buzzed with a direct message. From Vera's translator device. "Your people confuse me, Jake Miller. 20 hours ago, I was a dying mother with no hope. Now your species treats my children like they are precious. Like we matter. The little one, Pip, she asks when the nice humans with food are coming. She is not afraid anymore. Neither am I. Tell your leaders I will speak with them." Jake stared at the message, something warm and fierce blooming in his chest. Emily squeezed his shoulder. "You didn't end your career, Jake. You might have just changed the galaxy. Because that's what we do. We can't help it." Jake looked at the flood of messages, the ship's changing course, the outpouring of support from millions of humans who'd seen 3 hungry babies and a wounded mother and decided that was unacceptable. "We really can't help it, can we?" he said softly. "Nope," Emily agreed. "It's our worst habit and our greatest strength. We make friends with things that can kill us, and then we go absolutely feral protecting them." Jake pulled up the live feed from the cave. Vera was resting, her wound healing. The 3 hatchlings were playing in the entrance, chirping happily. Pip looked directly at the camera and waved a tiny clawed hand. Humanity had seen them. And humanity had responded. Now the galaxy would learn what happened when you threatened something humans had decided to protect. 3 months had passed since Jake's broadcast changed everything. Standing on the observation platform overlooking the crystalline forest, Jake could barely recognize the place. Where there'd been dead zones and poisoned water, life had returned with a vengeance. Human engineers had worked around the clock installing water purification systems. They'd mapped every underground river, cleaned every contaminated aquifer, and turned the toxic waste dumps into sealed containment sites. The prey animals had started returning 2 weeks ago, cautious at first, then in growing numbers. Now the forest hummed with life again. But the real miracle wasn't the environmental restoration. It was standing right in front of him. 7 more Dracovian families had emerged from hiding. 7 families that had been scattered across the planet, isolated and afraid, thinking they were alone in the galaxy. Vera's message had spread. Humans could be trusted. Humans would help. And one by one they'd come out of their caves. Right now, the real miracle was happening on the makeshift playing field below. Pip and her 2 siblings were in the middle of a soccer game with about a dozen human kids from the colony. The hatchlings had grown. They were almost twice the size they'd been 3 months ago, their wings strong enough for sustained flight. But right now they were focused on something more important than flying. "No, you can't use your wings." A 7-year-old boy named Tommy was laughing, jumping up and down. "That's cheating." Pip landed with a thump, looking sheepish. "But, faster with wings?" "Yeah, but that's not how soccer works." Tommy explained patiently. "You gotta run. Or, whatever you call it when you move on the ground." "Scuttle?" Pip offered. "Sure, scuttling works." The kids had picked up bits of Dracovian language, clicks, chirps, and trills that Jake still couldn't quite manage. The young Dracovians were learning English with the rapid ease of children everywhere. It was chaotic and beautiful and absolutely not what Jake had expected 3 months ago. Beth Harrison, one of the colony mothers, sat on a bench nearby with her knitting. Next to her, a juvenile Dracovian named Storm, about the size of a horse, was carefully practicing his pronunciation. "The ball goes in the goal?" Storm's translator crackled, but he was clearly trying to form the words himself. "Exactly," Beth said warmly, not even looking up from her knitting. "You're getting so good at this. Try this one." The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Storm's face scrunched up in concentration, a sight that would have terrified most species but just made Beth smile. Emily Brooks climbed the stairs to join Jake on the platform. She had a datapad clutched in one hand and looked like she'd been running. "The Galactic Council wants to send an investigative team," she said, slightly out of breath. "They're absolutely terrified." Jake glanced down at the playing field, where Pip had just scored a goal and was being mobbed by cheering human children. "Of what? Kids playing soccer?" "Of the implications," Emily said seriously. She pulled up something on her datapad. "Think about it from their perspective. Humans just formed an alliance with the galaxy's most feared predator species. We didn't do it through military conquest. We didn't negotiate for centuries with diplomats. We didn't offer trade deals or technology exchanges. You fed some hungry babies and suddenly we've got a military alliance. Jake frowned. It's not a military. 3 human frigates are still in orbit, Emily interrupted. We've got permanent defense stations being built. And yesterday, Vera formally agreed to joint security patrols. Jake, every species in the council is recalculating everything they thought they knew about humanity. Below, Vera herself approached the playing field. Her wound had healed completely, leaving barely a scar. She moved with fluid grace despite her massive size. The human children saw her and waved enthusiastically, showing absolutely no fear. Miss Vera, watch this trick. One of the kids kicked the ball high in the air. Vera settled down near the field, her tail curling around to provide a windbreak for the game. She watched with the patient attention of any parent watching their kids play. She wants to speak to the council, Emily said quietly. Yesterday she told me she's ready. She wants to explain what happened. Wants to assure them that Dracovians aren't preparing for war. Are you going? Jake asked. Emily shook her head. Not me. She wants you, Jake. You're going to the Galactic Council chambers. With her. As her. I guess the word is representative. Which was how Jake found himself 2 days later, wearing the nicest clothes he owned, sitting in a shuttle that was carrying him to the most important political building in known space. Vera rode in the cargo bay, the only space big enough for her, but her presence filled the entire ship. The council chamber was enormous, designed to accommodate hundreds of species with wildly different physiologies. Seats rose in tiers around a central speaking floor. Viewing screens floated in the air. The air itself was filtered and adjusted for dozens of different atmospheric requirements. When Jake and Vera entered, every single conversation stopped. Hundreds of alien eyes and eye equivalents turned to stare. A human and a Dracovian walking side by side. 3 months ago, most of these species had thought Dracovians were myths. Now one was standing in their council chamber. Jake's heart hammered, but he kept his face calm. Vera moved with regal confidence to the center of the speaking floor. Her translator hummed to life, broadcasting her voice to every seat in the chamber. I am Vera, matriarch of the Threshold Dracovians, she began. Her voice echoed in the massive space. For 3,000 cycles, my people have hidden from the galaxy. We learned that our strength made others fear us. So we withdrew. We watched your empires rise and fall from the shadows. We stayed in our caves and raised our children in isolation, teaching them to hide, to survive, to never trust. The chamber was absolutely silent. Species that had been squabbling about trade regulations 5 minutes ago were frozen in their seats. Then this human found my children starving, Vera continued, gesturing to Jake. He did not see monsters. He saw hungry babies. When he found me wounded and displaying threat, he did not run. He approached with medicine. And when he learned we were being hunted, murdered, our world poisoned, he did not calculate political advantage. He did not consider what my people could offer him. He simply said, I'll help. Vera's eyes swept the chamber. Humans have a saying, don't mess with things humans have adopted. The galaxy is about to learn why. My people are no longer hiding. We stand with humanity now. And together we will defend any who cannot defend themselves. An ambassador from a species Jake didn't recognize stood up, their translator crackling. This is unprecedented. Are you declaring a military alliance? Jake stepped forward before he could stop himself. We're declaring friendship. That's all. That's what this has always been. Vera's kids were hungry. We fed them. She was hurt. We helped. Someone was trying to kill them. We stopped it. That's not politics. That's just being decent. Just being decent, another ambassador repeated as if testing the words. You've mobilized ships, established defense platforms, and formed a permanent alliance with an apex predator species? Because of decency? Yeah, Jake said simply. That's kind of our thing. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans decided you were family. And there was nothing they could do to stop it.